Hades explained, the dark secret he guards in the underworld. We are told the story of Hades, the dark brother of Zeus, the god who rules over a kingdom of shadow and sorrow, the one whose name mortals dared not speak. He is often painted as a figure of malevolence, a devil-like entity who covets the world of the living and jealously guards his hoard of souls. But this is a portrait drawn by the fearful and the ignorant, a caricature created by the living to personify their terror of the unknown. The truth of the underworld, like the realm itself, lies far beneath the surface. What if Hades was not the master of a kingdom of the dead, but the jailer of something that should never have lived at all? What if his infamous abduction of Persephone was not an act of selfish lust, but a desperate, strategic necessity? Today, we journey past the river Styx, beyond the watchful gaze of the three-headed Cerberus, and into the very heart of darkness. We will uncover a story not of a grim king, but of a reluctant guardian. A story of a prison built at the very foundation of the cosmos, and the terrible, sleeping thing it contains. This is the tale of why Hades never sought to leave his kingdom, and why we should all be eternally grateful that he never did. Welcome to Mythos Unveiled. Today we seek to explain Hades, not as the god of death, but as the silent sentinel who guards us from a fate far, far worse. To understand the king, we must first understand his kingdom. And to understand his kingdom, we must return to the violent dawn of the Olympian age. After the cataclysmic 10-year war known as the Titanomachy, a conflict that scarred the very face of creation, the victorious gods, the three brothers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades gathered to divide the conquered cosmos. They cast lots, a game of divine chance to determine their eternal domains. Zeus, the ambitious, charismatic, and powerful leader, drew the heavens, becoming the king of Olympus, ruler of the sky, the clouds, and all the gods. Poseidon, the proud, tempestuous, and mighty earthshaker, drew the seas, a vast and chaotic kingdom to match his own untamable spirit. And Hades, the eldest brother, the first to be swallowed by their paranoid father Cronus, and therefore the first to know the silent, inescapable darkness, drew the final lot. The underworld. The myths often portray this as a tragic outcome, as though he were banished, exiled to the worst of the three realms. But this is a mortal perspective, tainted by our own profound fear of death. To the gods, the underworld was not a punishment. It was a third of all existence. It was a vast, mineral-rich, and profoundly important domain that governed the final journey of every living soul, mortal and divine. It was the great, unavoidable truth at the end of every story. Hades accepted his portion without complaint. He was not a god of loud pronouncements or public ambition. He was quiet, solemn, and deeply aware of the immense gravity of his new role. He became Hades, the unseen one, a name given not because he was evil, but because his work was done in the shadows, far from the light, drama, and petty squabbles of Olympus. With a quiet and resolute dignity, he descended into his kingdom, a realm of endless twilight, of 5 silent, flowing rivers, and of vast, gray fields of asphodel where the shades of the dead wandered in a state of eternal, memoryless melancholy. His kingdom was vast and complex, divided into distinct regions for the souls he was now charged with governing. There were the fields of asphodel, a neutral ground for the ordinary souls, those who had been neither virtuous nor wicked. There was Elysium, the Elysian fields, a sun-dappled paradise of eternal peace for the great heroes, the righteous, and those favored by the gods. And there were the fields of punishment, a place of torment for those who had committed truly heinous sins, those who had dared to directly defy the divine order. But there was another place, a place deeper than the rest, a place that existed long before Hades had ever claimed his throne. It was the abyss of Tartarus, The stories tell us that Tartarus was the prison for the defeated Titans, a pit so deep that an anvil dropped from heaven would fall for 9 days and 9 nights before reaching its floor. And this is true. The Titans were indeed chained in its black depths. But they were not its first nor its only prisoners. When Hades first explored the full, terrifying extent of his new domain, when he descended past the groaning, tormented souls in the fields of punishment, past the chained forms of his own Titan relatives, he found it. At the very bottom of Tartarus, sealed behind gates of unbreakable adamant forged in the fires of creation itself, lay something else, something older, something that the victorious Olympians, in their haste to establish their new order, had overlooked or perhaps had willfully and fearfully forgotten. It was a prison within a prison, a darkness within the darkness. He could not see what it held, but he could feel it, a psychic pressure, a vast, malevolent consciousness, not dead, not even truly alive, but sleeping, a silent, dreaming horror that radiated an aura of pure, cosmic wrongness. These were the things that even the Titans had feared. These were the primordial chaos monsters, the protogenoi phobouth firstborn fears, the first failed drafts of creation, beings of such profound madness and anti-existence that they had been sealed away by Uranus himself, at the very dawn of time. The Tartarian tablets, a set of lead scrolls supposedly recovered by Heracles during his 12th labor, speak of this. The Titans are but the newest inmates in an ancient asylum. The true madness slumbers below, dreaming of the day the walls will crumble. The Lord of the Dead is not a king of a graveyard. He is the warden of a madhouse. In that moment of chilling revelation, Hades understood the true nature of his lot. He had not been given a kingdom of the dead. He had been given a duty, a terrible, lonely, and eternal watch. His crown was a warden's heavy ring of keys. His bident scepter was not a symbol of rule, but a tool to reinforce the ancient locks. And his grim, silent, and detached demeanor was not a sign of malevolence, but the solemn, necessary mask of a man who stands guard, forever, at the gates of hell itself, to keep something even worse from getting out. For uncounted centuries, Hades ruled his kingdom in absolute, solemn silence. He rarely, if ever, journeyed to the sunlit world above. To do so would be to abandon his post. His life became a routine of grim judgment and silent governance. He presided over the souls of the endless procession of the dead, ensuring each was sent to its rightful place. He managed the vast, unseen wealth of the earth, the precious metals and gems that lay buried deep in his domain, for he was also Pluton, the rich one. But his existence was one of profound and crushing loneliness. On Olympus, his siblings and their divine children feasted, quarreled, loved, and betrayed one another. They lived in a world of vibrant, chaotic, and passionate drama. In the underworld, there was only silence, shadow, and the endless, whispering procession of the dead. His only constant companions were the grim ferryman Charon, his loyal, monstrous, three-headed hound Cerberus, and the ever-present, unsettling psychic pressure of the great, sleeping things in the pit below. He needed a queen, not just for companionship, though the loneliness was a weight unto itself. He needed one for a reason far more critical. The weight of his duty was immense. The psychic pressure emanating from the prison in Tartarus was a constant, low-level hum of madness, a dissonant frequency that wore away at the spirit of even a god. He needed an equal. He needed a being with the strength and vitality of the living world to balance the crushing stasis and encroaching madness of his own domain. A queen whose very presence would be an act of life, a flower growing in the darkness, reinforcing the reality of his kingdom against the unreality of the things he guarded. His gaze turned to the world above, and he saw her, Persephone, the daughter of his sister, Demeter, the great goddess of the harvest and the earth. She was the very embodiment of life, of spring, of renewal, of growth. Her laughter could make flowers bloom. Her presence brought warmth and light wherever she went. She was the perfect antithesis to his own dark, silent world. She was the anchor he needed. The story we are told is one of a lonely, love-struck god who, unable to win her fairly, resorted to brute force and abduction. A simple, if unsettling, story of divine entitlement. But this interpretation misses the terrible, strategic necessity of his actions. He could not court her in the traditional way. To explain his true need for her, I require you to be the living anchor of my kingdom, so the cosmic horrors I imprison do not drive me mad and break free to unmake reality, was unthinkable. The secret was too great, too terrible. To reveal it would be to cause a panic that could destabilize the very cosmos he sought to protect. And Demeter, her fiercely protective mother, would never have consented to let her daughter, the very embodiment of life, descend willingly into the realm of the dead. Hades, the solemn strategist, saw only one path. It was a cruel one, a path that would cause immense pain and grief, but in his grim, calculating mind, it was the only way. The stability of the underworld, and by extension, the safety of the entire cosmos, depended on it. He would have to take her. It was not an act of lust. It was an act of desperate cosmic engineering. He was not stealing a bride. He was acquiring the final, critical component for his prison's arcane containment system. One day, as Persephone was gathering flowers in a sun-drenched meadow with her nymph companions, the earth split open without warning. From the gaping chasm, Hades emerged in his magnificent, terrifying chariot, drawn by 4 black, immortal stallions with eyes of fire. He seized the screaming, terrified maiden and dragged her down with him into his shadowy realm, the earth closing seamlessly behind them, leaving only a scattering of dropped flowers and the horrified, fading cries of her friends. The underworld was not prepared for the arrival of life. The moment Persephone, the Kore, the maiden of spring, crossed its threshold, the very nature of the realm shifted. The silent, melancholic shades of the dead stirred. Drawn to the vibrant, living warmth she radiated like moths to a flame. The dark, stagnant air seemed to thin, to brighten with a light it had never known. For the first time, a flower bloomed in the gray, unchanging fields of Asphodelus, single, pale, and lonely Narcissus, the very flower she had been picking when she was taken from the world. Hades did not treat her as a captive in the way a mortal tyrant would. He treated her with a solemn, almost reverent respect. He led her to a magnificent throne of polished ebony and silver, set beside his own. He showed her the vast, silent, and haunting beauty of his kingdom. The glittering veins of gold and silver in the subterranean walls, the silent, majestic flow of the 5 rivers of the underworld, the quiet, peaceful fields of Elysium where heroes rested. This is your kingdom now as it is mine, he told her, his voice, so long accustomed to silence, resonating with a deep, ancient sorrow and a strange, unfamiliar hope. You are not my prisoner. You are my queen. Persephone, at first, was consumed by a terror and a grief that were absolute. She wept for her mother, for the warmth of the sun, for the vibrant, living world she had lost. She refused to eat or drink, knowing with a goddess's intuition that to consume the food of the underworld would be to bind herself to it forever. But as the days, or what passed for days in that timeless twilight place, stretched on, she began to see what Hades saw. She began to feel the immense, crushing weight of his eternal duty. She was a goddess, and her perceptions were keener, more attuned to the cosmic frequencies than immortals. She could feel it, too. the low, dissonant hum from the depths of Tartarus, the constant, malevolent pressure of the sleeping things. She began to understand. His solemnity was not cruelty. It was the profound exhaustion of an eternal watch. His silence was not a lack of feeling. It was the necessary, unwavering focus of a guardian who could never, for a single moment, let his attention wander. She saw the lines of eternal weariness etched into his powerful, regal face, and her fear, slowly, miraculously, began to transform into a strange, profound empathy. And Hades, for his part, found that her presence was exactly what he had needed. Her life force, her intrinsic connection to the world of growth and renewal, acted as a powerful living ward. The psychic pressure from the prison lessened. The maddening whispers from the deep grew quieter, soothed and repelled by the presence of a queen whose very nature was anathema to them. He found he could think more clearly, that the weight on his soul was, for the first time in his immortal existence, shared. He was not just a lonely king who had found a companion. He was a warden who had found his partner. Together, their two opposing forces, the eternal stasis of death and the vibrant cycle of life, created a perfect, stable, and powerful equilibrium. This new balance strengthened the very foundations of the underworld, reinforcing the metaphysical walls of the great prison below. While a new, strange, and necessary balance was being forged in the underworld, the world above was dying. Demeter, the great goddess of the harvest, was consumed by a grief so absolute that it became a weapon. In her sorrow, she abandoned her divine duties, and her sorrow became a blight upon the land. The crops failed. The leaves fell from the trees and did not return. The fertile fields turned to cracked, barren dust. A terrible, unending winter fell upon the earth. Humanity, caught in the crossfire of this divine tragedy, began to starve. The gods on Olympus were inundated with the desperate, unanswered prayers of dying mortals. No sacrifices were made on their altars, for there was nothing left to offer. Zeus, the king of all, realized that this was a crisis that could unravel his entire cosmic order. A world without mortals was a world without worshippers, a silent and pointless kingdom. He sent messenger after messenger, Iris on her rainbow, Hermes on his winged sandalsto, Demeter, pleading with her and then commanding her to let the earth live again. But her grief was unyielding, a force of nature as powerful as any storm. "I will not let a single seed sprout from this frozen soil," she vowed, her voice as cold as the world she had created, "until I have my daughter back." Finally, Zeus had no choice. The survival of the world depended on it. He dispatched Hermes to the underworld with a direct, unassailable command for Hades. He must release Persephone. Hades, for all his power in his own domain, could not defy a direct order from the king of the gods. His heart, which had known a strange, quiet contentment with his queen, grew heavy as a block of lead. He knew that without her, the old pressure would return, the whispers from the deep would grow louder, and his lonely, terrible watch would become unbearable once more. But a command was a command. He went to Persephone, his face a mask of regal indifference, a mask he had worn for centuries, now used to hide the chasm of despair that had opened within his soul. "You are free to go," he said, his voice even. "Zeus has commanded it." Persephone, though she had come to understand and even pity her solemn husband, was overjoyed at the news. She would see her mother again. She would feel the sun on her skin. She would walk in the green fields of the living world. But as she prepared to leave, Hades offered her one last thing. A pomegranate, its skin as dark as a blood clot, its seeds gleaming like rubies in the gloom of his realm. "You must be hungry from your long fast," he said softly, his voice betraying a hint of tenderness. Eat just a little, for strength on your long journey back to the light. Was it a trick? A final, desperate act of a possessive husband to bind her to him? The myths are divided, but in our unveiled truth it was something more. It was a last-ditch strategic effort to maintain the cosmic balance he had fought so hard to create. He knew that if she left forever, the prison would eventually weaken. But if she was bound to return, if her vibrant life force could be brought back into his realm periodically, then perhaps the equilibrium could be maintained. Persephone, her guard down in her moment of joy, and perhaps feeling a pang of genuine affection for the solemn god who had been her respectful, if melancholic, king, accepted the fruit. She ate. The myths differ on the number of seeds. Some say 3, some say 4, some say 6. But the number does not matter. The act was done. She had consumed the food of the dead. She was now bound to the underworld, inextricably and forever. When Persephone returned to the world above, Demeter's joy was boundless. The earth itself seemed to celebrate with her. The snows melted in an instant. The frozen fields turned green. The trees burst into leaf, and flowers exploded across the land in a riot of color. Spring had returned. But the joy was short-lived. When it was revealed that Persephone had eaten the pomegranate seeds, a new, terrible reality set in. She could not stay in the world of the living forever. She was now part of the underworld. A great council of the gods was held on Olympus. Zeus, seeing that a compromise was the only way to prevent either the world from starving or the underworld from collapsing into chaos, brokered a final, lasting bargain. For the part of the year corresponding to the number of seeds she had eaten, Persephone would live in the underworld as Hades's rightful queen. For the rest of the year, she would be allowed to return to the world above to be with her mother. And so the seasons were born. When Persephone is with her mother, Demeter, the earth is warm and fertile. We have spring and summer. But when the time comes for her to descend back to her throne in the underworld, Demeter mourns, and her grief plunges the world into the cold, barren quiet of autumn and winter. This is the story we are all told, a beautiful and poignant explanation for the cycle of nature. But it is also the explanation for the cycle of the prison's containment. Persephone's annual descent into the underworld is not just a visit to her husband. It is a necessary recalibration of the cosmic prison. Her return infuses the dark realm with a powerful, concentrated burst of life energy, reinforcing the psychic wards of Tartarus, pushing back against the encroaching madness of the sleeping things, and giving her king, her husband, the strength and mental fortitude to endure his watch for another year. The changing of the seasons is not just a story of a mother's grief. It is the rhythmic, deep breath of a cosmic containment facility, inhaling life to maintain its stability, and exhaling it back into the world. Persephone is not just a goddess of spring. She is a living key, turning the lock of the great prison once a year, ensuring its integrity for all time. She and Hades, life and death, together, became the perfect, eternal wardens of a secret the world could never know. Few mortals ever dared to enter the underworld while still alive. The journey was perilous, the goal often impossible. But a handful of heroes, in their pride and power, made the descent. And their stories, when viewed through the lens of Hades's true purpose, reveal more about his nature than any other. Consider Orpheus, the master musician whose lyre could charm the very stones and trees into weeping. When his beloved wife, Eurydice, died from a snakebite, his grief was so immense that he resolved to do the impossible, to journey to the land of the dead and bring her back. He made his way to the underworld, and his music, an expression of pure, heartbreaking sorrow, was so beautiful that it achieved the impossible. The silent shades of the dead wept. The iron-hard hearts of the Furies themselves felt a moment of pity. The great beast Cerberus lay down and whimpered like a lost puppy. He reached the throne of Hades and Persephone, and he played for them. His song spoke of his love, his loss, his utter, soul-crushing despair. Persephone, the queen who understood both life and sorrow, was moved to tears. And even Hades, the grim, unmovable king, felt the cold stone of his heart stir. He agreed to let Eurydice return, but he gave one single absolute condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her and not look back, not for any reason, until they had both reached the sunlight of the upper world. It is often seen as a cruel psychological test, but it was not. It was a necessary law of his realm's physics. A soul can only move in one direction, forward out of his kingdom. To look back is to reassert its connection to the world of the dead, to acknowledge its state of being, and thus to break the fragile metaphysical process of its release. Orpheus tragically failed at the very last moment, just as he stepped into the light, consumed by doubt and an overwhelming love. He looked back to ensure she was there, and he watched as the shade of his wife, with a sorrowful final glance, was pulled back into the darkness forever. Hades was not being cruel. He was simply enforcing the immutable law of his domain, a law that kept the fundamental boundary between life and death from unraveling. Then consider the very different case of the heroes Theseus and Pirithous. Pirithous, in an act of supreme, unthinkable arrogance, decided he would take Persephone herself, the queen of the underworld, as his new bride. Theseus, bound by a foolish oath of friendship, agreed to help him. They descended into the underworld not with sorrow, but with the intent of conquest and abduction. They sought to shatter the very balance of the prison. Hades knew of their coming. He did not meet them with force or fury. He met them with a grim, knowing, and false hospitality. He invited them to sit and feast with him. But the moment the two heroes sat upon the stone chairs he offered, they found they could not get up. Vipers, manifestations of the underworld's judgment, coiled around their feet, binding them to the very rock of his kingdom. Hades did not torture them. He simply left them there, a permanent, silent, and chilling warning to any who would dare to threaten the stability of his queen and his kingdom. He was not a tyrant. He was a warden enforcing the absolute security of his prison. When Heracles later came and, with his great strength, freed Theseus, Pirithous was left behind, a testament to the fact that some crimes against the cosmic order can never, ever be forgiven. These intrusions were not just annoyances to Hades. Each time a living being entered his realm, it created an imbalance, a ripple of life force that could be felt all the way down to the great prison in Tartarus, potentially disturbing the sleepers. His swift, unyielding, and seemingly cruel justice was not the act of a petty king, but the necessary, calculated response of a sentinel repelling a grave threat to his post. The underworld is famous for its eternal punishments, for the great sinners who suffer for their hubris against the gods. Tantalus, forever standing in a pool of water he can never drink, reaching for fruit he can never taste. Sisyphus, forever pushing a great boulder up a hill, only to have it roll down again the moment he nears the top. These punishments are seen as fitting, ironic tortures devised by a grim and vengeful god. But what if their purpose is something else entirely? What if they are not just punishments but power sources? Consider the nature of these torments. They are endless, repetitive, and agonizing cycles of hope and despair. Sisyphus almost reaches the top. Tantalus almost tastes the fruit. This constant near success followed by inevitable, crushing failure generates an immense amount of a very specific kind of psychic energy. Futility, despair, struggle, negative emotional output. The prison in Tartarus, the sleeping chaos, is a being of anti-existence. It cannot be sustained or placated by positive life force, which is anathema to it. It is, however, soothed and kept in its state of torpor by its opposite, negative psychic energy. The fields of punishment, then, are not just a jail. They are a power plant. The eternal, futile struggles of the great sinners are not just for the sake of punishment. They are generating a constant, low-level field of negative energy that flows downwards, not to feed the prisoner, but to placate it, to keep it in its state of dreaming slumber. It is like a white noise machine for a cosmic horror. Hades, the great and terrible administrator, designed these punishments with a terrible, brilliant, and chilling purpose. He turned the very sins and hubris of mortals into the bricks and mortar of his prison's containment field. Sisyphus is not just pushing a rock. He is powering a ward. Tantalus is not just suffering from hunger and thirst. He is feeding the silence. This is the final, terrible secret of the underworld. The entire realm, from the queen on her throne to the most damned soul in the pit, is part of a single, vast, and intricate containment system. And Hades, the silent king, the unseen one, is the architect and operator of it all. A thankless, eternal task he performs in the shadows, to keep the sunlit world of the living safe from the waking dreams of the things that sleep below. So we must reevaluate the god we call Hades. He is not the villain of the Greek pantheon. He is not a devil, not a demon, not a force of malevolence. He is, perhaps, the greatest and most unsung hero of them all. He is the eldest son who, by the grim chance of a lottery, was given the most terrible and most important duty in the cosmos. He is the king who rules not over a kingdom of souls, but over a prison of unimaginable scale. He is the husband who kidnapped his wife not out of lust, but out of a desperate need to stabilize the very foundations of reality. And he is the judge whose punishments are not just acts of justice, but crucial components in a cosmic machine designed to protect us all. His grimness is the weight of his knowledge. His isolation is the price of his eternal duty. He is the silent wall that stands between our world and a chaos that would unmake it. He is the warden who never sleeps, the sentinel who never looks away, the king who sacrificed his own happiness and reputation for the sake of a cosmic balance that no one else even knew was threatened. The greatest trick the Olympians ever played was not in their wars or their love affairs. It was in allowing the world to misunderstand their dark, solemn, and utterly necessary brother. They let him become a figure of fear, because the truth of what he truly guards is a fear far too great for the mortal or divine mind to bear. He is the hero who accepts being seen as the villain, because it is the only way to do his job. The greatest darkness is sometimes used to hold back a greater one. And the greatest heroes are often the ones whose names we are afraid to speak. Thank you for journeying with us into the underworld. If this unveiling of a misunderstood god has opened your eyes, show your support by liking this video, subscribing to Mythos Unveiled, and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the shadows of our legends.